Hello and welcome. This is our keynote for the day. I have the great honor and pleasure to introduce a fabulous group of people who took time out of their busy days to come here and share a few thoughts with us. So challenges, accomplishments, and all several issues. So I'm gonna let them deal with the crowds. Feel free to chat with them and send in questions. So Iris Goldfeder is leading the discussion, and we're joined by Dr. Erin Baker, Scott Span, Megan Doherty, Kevin Jones, Heather Vickery, and Annie Ruggles. So welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to introduce or let everybody introduce themselves, and then we can kind of get on. But today is for LGBTQIA plus businesses and challenges and opportunities that we face and that we've had. And that as an LGBTQIA plus business, as we're running our businesses, we run into challenges, but we also have opportunities to educate people. So I'm going to start by introducing the panel. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I will start with, I guess, alphabetical order. So Annie.
Hey y'all, I'm Annie P. Ruggles. I am the founder of the Non-Sleazy Sales Academy and the host of Too Legitimate to Quit. And I live in the US in Chicago. And hi, Marianne. Thanks for being here. I just saw that come in through the chat.
Okay, and then Erin.
Hey everyone, I am Dr. Erin. I have a PhD in psychology, so I like to put the doctor in front of things. And I am a business and leadership coach for small business owners. And I wrote a book last year called Joyful AF, the essential business strategy we're afraid to put first. Look at Annie's got it up right there. And I never know where I am, but right now I live in LA in the US.
Thank you. And Heather?
Hi, folks. My name is Heather Vickery. I am the CEO and founder of a company called Vickery & Co. I am a transformational success coach and mentor. I wrote a book too. Annie, is my book there? Do you have it right there? It's called F Fearless, Making the Brave Leap. So I love the title of Erin's book, and I can't wait to get together with Erin and exchange book stuff. My work really revolves around helping folks learn to come home to themselves and belong to themselves before everyone else in the world, to find your answers within, to spark your own intuition, ignite your self-compassion, self-awareness, self-love, confidence, and then show up and do all the things that you are masterfully and purposefully designed to do. Thanks, Annie. So that's what I do. I'm really excited to be here. This is a great panel of people.
Absolutely. Yes. Kevin.
Hi, y'all. I'm going to do Annie's y'all because I'm from Dallas, Texas, and that's where I'm sitting today. I am a former executive, retired now from corporate America. I have my own coaching company, leadership coaching, that's focused on LGBTQ folks and their allies. It's called Concilium Coaching. If any of you are Latin geeks like I am, you know that means counsel, advise, collaborate. So Concilium, Latin word for all that. Concilium Coaching. And just I'm going to join the crowd here. I'm also a published author. My book came out in June. It's called Opening the Corporate Closet, Transforming Biases to Gay Advancement in Corporate America. Super catchy title, I know, but you can just call it Opening the Corporate Closet. And again, here in Dallas with my husband, Simon, of 7 years marriage, 23 years partner in crime, and our 2 crazy Boston Terriers. And so happy to be here and looking forward to a great conversation with everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. And Megan?
I'm Megan Doherty. I am the Canadian of the group. So I live in Western Quebec, and I run a podcast production agency called One Stone Creative and host an annual podcasting for business conference, which is happening in just a couple of weeks. So I'm really excited to be here and talk to everybody. And while I don't have a book, I do work with several authors to help turn their books into podcasts. So I'm very fond of them too.
Thank you. And Scott?
So hello, everybody. I'm Scott Span. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area in the States as well. And my work is focused on both consulting and on coaching. I'm a leadership coach and a change and transformation specialist. So the work on the consulting side is more focused on the employee experience and making sure that organizations are the best possible places to work for the people within them. And my coaching work is more focused on supporting people to actually dig deeper, to identify and overcome what's holding them back, and often change behaviors to accelerate their performance. And I am published on the topic of authenticity as well, how to access your authenticity to be you and bring you. So I'm in great company here with all of my fellow authors. And yes, I look forward to collaborating as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm Iris Goldfeder, founder and CEO of Gas Stove Creative. We are all-in-one marketing solutions for the service-based business. And I am now starting to speak. So here we are. So I'm going to start this off. And we know that not everybody is represented here as far as diversity goes. Yes, there are gay people on the panel. We have people, we have Dr. Erin, her pronouns are they, them. And we have, Annie is bi, and Kevin, the rest of us are, gay, but there are no people of color. There are no other nationalities that are represented here. So if you feel comfortable and you want to, say something in the chat that you want us to focus on, please feel free. Don't be shy, because we know that not everyone is represented here. So, okay. So one of the things that we talked about, we had a get together on Monday, and we were trying to, really come up with some good things to discuss today. And one of them was personal values. How do you or do you not show up authentically? And what's the impact of whether we do or don't? And, as gay people, showing up authentically can sometimes be a challenge. It depends on where we are, it depends on who we're working with, and then how do we handle that? So let's start. I guess we'll just go alphabetical order. Annie.
Oh boy.
And I think
Such a
we can all
doozy.
discuss it.
No, I'm just saying it's a doozy of a question, because it's the idea of what is a value, and how does that really show up, and is owning your queerness a value? Is that just transparency? Is that authenticity? Is that bravery, to use Heather's word? Is it all of it? I think it's all of it. Is that a value? And what else are my values, right? Am I going to be outspoken on other ways, right? Like, if I'm going to be a bold defender of the queer, am I also going to step up and be a bold defender for people of color? Am I also going to be a bold defender for the disabled, right? And, or for me, I love to work with the incarcerated who have their own giant list of stigma, right? So I think it's really interesting, because unlike other forms of diversity, for some people, certainly not for all people, queerness is a hidden thing, right? Like, we talked a lot about coming out of the closet. And for a lot of us, people hear me talk about my husband, they assume that I'm straight. And that's fine. They can assume that. I will set them straight if they ask, or if I feel the need to correct them. But that could be perceived as me not living my value if I'm not running around correcting every single person. And so for me, the answer is, where are your boundaries, and where are the safe places for you to show up fully? Because I am very, very lucky. I am a very privileged person living in the middle of the very blue, democratic, queer bubble in the US. And so for me, living my values is very different than maybe how living your values is in a corporate environment, like the question in the chat, or if you are not able to kind of recloset from day to day.
And that's, yeah. And so we have Raquel saying, how about being out in the workplace, the good, the bad, and the ugly? I mean, that's, I think, all part of it. And I think there was a time when probably all of us were in corporate, because we're not anymore. It was like a long time ago, that it wasn't okay. Like, if you came out and you were gay, most times you were, eviscerated for being gay, and, you would lose your job. There were things like that. I think that today it's a little bit different now in a lot of places. I'm not going to say all places. and then I see Marianne says, showing up your authentic self. Some people say they wear masks. Isn't it dishonest? I don't think it's a matter of being dishonest. I think it's a matter of being safe, right? At this point. What do you all think about that
I
comment?
think it's both, quite frankly. I actually had that conversation with a coaching client this morning. Can't go into the personal details, obviously, but the situation was very similar. And corporate America, very large firm, global organization. And there are differences as well that he was sharing between when he's working abroad, for example, in certain areas versus the culture of his home office here in the States. And it was interesting to hear that he feels that he's more accepted and could be more of himself, his authentic self, in other locations, as opposed to where his office is here in the States. But the dishonest piece was something that came up in context as well, and he actually said this, I can share. He said the word disservice, right? Disservice to himself in that regard. So we broke that down a little bit. But one of the things that came up is, to your point, Iris, safety, right? So sometimes, as members of the LGBTQ plus community, we have to take safety into account, which often means, that we are being dishonest or we are doing ourselves a disservice. But, safety aside too, there's also the piece of climbing the ladder, so to speak, if that's the path you want to take in a corporate system, right? And what the impacts are there as well, if in certain situations, we are not living our authentic lives, or we are not out in the workplace. So I think it's very situational, but it's not just the safety piece, that comes into account as well, which was interesting. But people are aware of it, and when you become aware of it, then sometimes this conversation too, this came up, it can be very, very frustrating, right? And you have some serious decisions to make, to Annie's point about values as well, right? Am I going to stay in this organization? Am I going to stay in this career? Am I going to say something? Am I not? Right. And then who else am I going to speak on behalf of, so that they can be their authentic selves as well as me. And I'm sorry, Kevin, I know you live this. So.
Right.
Scott, I'm internally nodding with everything that you're saying. And I would just add to that, because I love the point about as you're moving up the corporate ladder. And what is so impactful to me, the number of people I've spoken to, not only in the coaching practice, but when I was doing the research for my book, the number of people who said, the more senior you are in the organization, the easier it is to come out because you've already proven yourself. And
Right.
so another challenge that many folks face, and I faced it as well. Do I put myself out there and be my authentic self early on in my career and risk missing out on career opportunities because I'm gay, with those microaggressions that may never be specifically about performance or explicitly about performance, but there are other reasons. You're just not there yet. You're not quite the right fit. Whereas when you've overcome those obstacles as you're moving up in your career, people say, well, now that I've made it, however you define making it, it's easier to come out, because at that point you're an influencer. You've got a voice at the table versus trying to make your way up. And so in addition to the safety, in addition to the mask that somebody brought up, when do we wear that mask? When do we take it off based on where we want to get to in our careers and how we define success?
Right. And that's so,
I think
There's
so
two
telling,
things
but-
that I saw. This is from the Q&A from participants as well, that I had just saw on this topic too. And Kevin, maybe you can speak to this as well, and what you were just mentioning. But there's a comment from Marianne, or comment/question. You say now that it is okay, but in places outside the United States, to the situational piece, it is not okay. So perhaps it's situational. Is it tough not to be accepted? But again, if you are authentic, then you're passed over potentially for opportunities.
well,
Scott,
and that's
can I
what
jump
I'm
in on that?
saying.
'Cause
So
Yeah, no, that's why I wanted to make sure you saw that. Go
Yeah,
ahead, yeah.
thank you for paying that. And Iris, I'm sorry. I know we're doing what we did, and when we were practicing on Monday, this is exactly what we did. So
which we
I
knew
will be
was going to
very.
happen.
I'll
But I
be
want to
very
give
quick,
I want to
yeah.
give Megan and Heather and Erin a
Yeah,
chance to
Yeah,
talk
go ahead.
also.
I will. I
So
keep going
boys,
on
stop
about
and
this. Go
let
ahead.
the
Yeah.
I just want to make sure participants' comments get shared as well. Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. So go ahead, any of you.
I think there's another way to look at it as well. I mean, of course, there's safety, there's being authentic. There's an argument also to be made. You can be authentically a private person. There's nothing inherently better about being out. If you don't, I find myself in this situation a lot. I don't care to talk about my personal life with clients very often. Sometimes it comes up and I never hide anything when it does, but just, by nature, I'm not interested in sharing a lot of personal details with people that I'm not close to in like real life. And I don't, there's nothing less queer about that. And there's nothing less authentic about, authentically not adding vulnerability to a situation where it isn't really necessary. So I think that's just something to be considered as well when it comes to values. If privacy is a perfectly good value.
Absolutely. Vulnerability and authenticity does not require you to turn yourself inside out. It does not mean you have to like spill everything to everyone all the time. And I think, there's a fine line between taking a stand, creating the space, being a voice and ally for people in our own community and people in other communities. And also, this is your own timeline. Bi-erasure is real. When Annie talked about looking straight, people are going to make assumptions. That doesn't make her less queer, which is one of the reasons we all were like, she needs to be on this panel because it's really important.
Yes.
You get to come out on your own timeline. And when you want, it is about privacy. You are allowed to have that. And so you have to decide for yourself what that means to you, what action you want to take, what action you don't want to take, and then be honest about the fact that that's going to shift as you change, as your business changes, as your clients change, all of that. And then I'm going to pass the baton to Erin. I've been really eager to hear Erin on this topic because Erin has a very different perspective than all of the rest of us. And it's super important.
And Erin, there's a question in there specifically for you as well, if you didn't see it.
Okay, let me take a quick look.
Why you've got the floor. Yeah.
I'm like, where's all the chats?
If you click on the bottom.
No, I have them all. Scott, can you just tell me what the question is so I don't have to, okay, hold on. I
found it was, as a psychologist, what advice do you offer to help people deal with microaggression and passive aggressive people in the workplace?
Okay, I'll try to address that in a couple ways, but let me just start off with all y'all who can pass, congratulations. And it's really important that we look at this panel right now, and I'm the only one who someone will look at in the real world and know immediately that I fall somewhere in the LGBTQIA umbrella.
Yep.
There is no such thing as keeping it private for me. Keeping it private for me would have been keeping long hair. Keeping it private would have been not having top surgery. Keeping it private would have been my mental health versus my career progression. And so I really want to honor anyone out there for whom you can't choose to be private, and honor the courage it takes, and honor that it really does suck, that there are trade-offs that we have to make because the world has, preconceived notions of who we are and what it means to be queer. So I don't have a solution for that, and I'm not going to offer one because I don't think there is one. But I just want everyone who cannot hide to know I see you and I honor you.
And we all see you. I will tell you, as somebody who knows like a lot of people who've transitioned in the last like 5 years, it's it's hell. It's hard. And Dr. Erin, the way that you show up, I applaud you for doing that because it's hard. I mean, walking through life and people looking at you differently, so I really applaud you on that.
I wanted to address one of the questions in the Q&A, and then I'm sure Iris wants to move on, but I think this is a really valid question. And we talked about this a lot in our prep meeting. The question is actually, are we not letting other people control the timing and the way people are coming out? Who says people have the obligation to come out or make private issues so public? So there is kind of an undercurrent, I think, in the community that you are doing the community a disservice if you don't come out. So even if we're talking about Dr. Erin, before you started to be visibly queer, right? Like that is still your journey on your timeline, and it doesn't change who you are on the inside, right? And there, when you think about celebrity, the quote unquote queer baiting conversation, is that what it is? Or is it just gender expression or self-expression or whatever? And there's a lot of pressure put on people that if you're going to be a good community member, You have to be publicly out. And that is just 100% not the truth.
Right.
To be a good community member, you can't cause harm. You don't want to cause harm. You don't want to be hurtful. You want to be supportive, but you do not have to follow anybody else's timeline. So yeah, to answer that question, there are people who really will pressure other folks to come out on somebody else's timeline. And it's just really unacceptable.
And I, to kind of, jump on that too. I feel like when I meet somebody straight, I don't assume, and this is what kind of blew my mind about, like, because I was talking about, was it you, Annie? And it was somebody I was talking with last week. I talk to Annie like so often that it kind of, everything like blurs in with her. But, when we start working with people, the first thing we think of is not who do you love or who are you sleeping with? What the F, people? I mean, that's what drives me nuts. If somebody sits down with me and the first thing that they think about is who do I love? Who am I married to? Who am I sleeping with? Dude, there's a problem there. I mean, and I think that what happened, I think Kevin, you and I talked about this, that the church and the right wing were really, really smart about sexualizing this and not making it about love, but making it about sex. Because as soon as they made it about sex, that's when they could say this is deviant and this is all wrong. But it's not about sex, it's about love. And Erin, Dr. Erin, you loving yourself enough to be able to embrace that. That's huge. And, I'm not gonna let my New Yorker come out because we're on this, international panel. So I'm gonna be good. But, to me, it's like what, Heather's book says, F that. This is about love. Period. So, so I'm going to get a little fired up about that, but I do want to move on because that'll be a whole nother conversation. Boundaries. We were talking about boundaries, and this is like perfect, right? So which boundaries do we set for ourselves? And then which boundaries do we allow others to set on us? Because when we work with people, right, we have our own boundaries. Don't call me past 6 p.m. unless something's on fire or, whatever. But then if we're going to work with somebody who may not be LGBTQIA plus friendly, if we're going to work with somebody who we don't know, right? Like we don't know what it is. And then all of a sudden these boundaries kind of come up. Which boundaries are we willing to work through with somebody else? And for me, it's none. I don't have boundaries when it comes. No, I have boundaries when it comes to myself, but if you put boundaries on me, I'm not working with you. That's me personally. So
there's a chapter in my book on boundaries, and I have an entire keynote presentation on boundaries. So I'd love to go first, and then I'll be fairly quick. First of all, the dictionary defines boundaries as limits that define acceptable behavior. And what I add to that is that you get to decide what's acceptable for you. You get to decide what's acceptable for you. And I can have my boundaries and you can have yours, Iris, and you can choose not to respect my boundaries, but that's not about me. That's about you, right? I'm not saying that, so yes, I have office hours. I have this and that. One of my boundaries is, if you are not outwardly affirming of not just the LGBTQ community, but social justice issues across the board, we are not going to collaborate. Just yesterday, someone reached out to me and said, would you like to do this project with us? And I go to their website and I go to their bios and it all sounds great, but I don't see anything declaring where they are. And that's fine. Because remember, I said you get to do this on your own time frame, but I asked, is everyone involved open and affirming of the LGBTQ community? And I got the answer and I made a decision about whether or not I was going to move forward. So, boundaries are not about anybody else. I have a boundary that, I do private coaching and we connect in the Telegram app. And I don't check the Telegram app after 4 p.m. any day, ever. But that doesn't mean my clients don't message me after 4 p.m. because that's their boundary. They get to do whatever. And so boundaries allow us to declare what is acceptable. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows what they're dealing with. Everybody knows what the playbook says. And then you don't have to be sorry. I'm not sorry that I didn't see your message at 9 o'clock at night. It's fine. I saw it at 9 o'clock the next morning, whatever that looks like. That's just a silly example, but it could be anything and it applies to everything. And boundaries are really important and you are all worthy of setting them. Think about what hurts that's where you set a boundary around it. If it
Right.
hurts and you don't like it, set a boundary around it. And then you have to clearly communicate it, because people can't give you what you want if they don't know what it is.
Right.
You
And I
have to tell people.
Heather,
And-
can you talk? Sorry, this is the question for Heather, curiosity.
Go
Iris.
ahead.
Can you talk a little bit, since this came up earlier, from your perspective about how values inform boundaries?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, so much of my work is about reassessing what you're having to do in your life, what you want, where you want to go, how you want to feel about it. So you have to actually do that work. You have to go, what is important to me? What are my values? And how do I live those out loud? The ones that I want to live out loud. And boundaries are a huge component of that, because then you have to decide what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. I remember in 2016, we all might remember 2016, no matter where you are in the world, it was a big year. I had a friend who owns a restaurant, and we were having a conversation about having a particular type of clientele. And I said, I don't want that clientele. And she's like, well, as a restaurant owner, I don't get that privilege. But you can set boundaries around how people can behave, the kinds of things they can say in your own space. But I'm very clear. My boundary is, if you look at my website, I have a mission statement, and I have a support of the Black and BIPOC community statement and the queer community statement. And like, if you don't want it, don't come here. That's fine. So, but it takes effort to really think about what those values are and what boundaries you want to set around them. And you have to do that inner work. I had a client earlier today who said, I like to keep that door firmly closed on reflection. And I was like, we need to unpack that, because you have to reflect in order to do this, honestly.
I mean, you need reflection. And, for me, when I say that I have, if somebody puts boundaries on me, then I don't work on them. I mean, if it's like, so my boundary is now, I'm not taking calls after 5 o'clock. I am not working with a certain type of business owner or a certain type of person. If somebody's values do not align with mine, I will not work with them. Those are the boundaries that I set, right? But if I have a client and then they start setting, well, in order for you to work for me, you have to do A, B, C, D, and E, then to me, that's them putting a boundary on me. And then that I don't think I'm okay with, because if you hire me, you're hiring me for a reason, because you know that I'm going to get this job done. But if you put a leash on me, then I'm
But
not.
that's you putting your boundaries into play and saying that's not acceptable to me.
Yes.
So they can have those boundaries. They can say that to you, and you don't have to accept it.
And
Yes.
you also don't have to go where you are not inbound, right? So Marianne asked a really, really important question, and I don't know how to answer the first part, which is how do we help people get back to live and let live? I don't know. And it seems we are living in a radicalization time, absolutely. But the thing that I wanted to address that Marianne brought up is something that we actually discussed in our pre-chat on Monday, which is this idea of Florida. And I know that we're on a VC Europe panel. So I don't want to get too American about this, but just to show how everybody's boundaries are individualized and it's not on us to judge each other's boundaries. We had a very real talk as a panel about whether or not we have or would attend an event in the state of Florida, which is passing constant anti-queer legislation. And we talked earlier, and Dr. Aaron talked earlier about not being able to hide. I can go to an event in Florida and be totally safe. But am I standing in queer community if I'm going to an event in Florida? And am I condoning events still being in Florida, knowing full well that if Aaron went to Florida, they could be very physically, seriously harmed or killed? And yet I'm still choosing to spend money in the state of Florida. Now, that is a very nuanced thing. And there's a lot of different ways you could look at that. I've heard queer communities say we need to retake Florida. We need to be gayer and louder than ever in Florida. We need to spend money in the gay businesses in Florida so that they don't go out. I've heard people say, well, just go and be a good ally to trans people in Florida. I've heard every possible thing, including fully boycott Florida. And none of those answers are right, and none of those answers are wrong. They're just the answers that are right for you. And none of us can make that decision for each other, right? I can't tell a gay man what to do. I can't tell other bi people what to do. And I certainly can't tell Dr. Aaron what to do. And that's just one US state, right? So you get to decide where you spend your money as a business owner and as a person. And you also get to decide how you want to rise against those things too. Because the person that says, let's make Florida gayer than ever, and the person that says, let's never, ever, ever even mention the word Florida, are both making choices based on their boundaries, based on their truth, and to bring back to what we talked about at the very beginning, to talk about their safety. Right? Because the world will put boundaries on us too. And if the state of Florida is saying no homo, that changes things.
Right. And there's a lot of people that are watching this that are in countries where it's not safe to be gay. They can be killed just for being their authentic selves. So that puts, that's a real serious boundary that unfortunately they probably have to live within, because that's their life. It's not like walking down the freaking street and, this is like walking out of your house and getting shot, or being dragged out of your house because somebody found out. And, so there's, it's very frustrating to me, the amount of hatred that is pointed towards us as a queer community. It infuriates me. It hurts. It pisses me off, but then it also makes me want to take action. And through this is one of the other things we talked about, because this isn't all gloom and doom. We have opportunities, right? We have opportunities to work with people and show them, hey, gay people are freaking awesome. We're creative. We get shit done, right? I had a client that was a Bibleist. I walked into her office, and I think we talked, I walked into her office and there were crosses and Bible verses, and I almost turned around because I was like, man, my skin is going to singe off. By the time I sit in her chair in her office, I will have no skin left on my body because I will be smited. But I met her and she was a wonderful woman. She was a really kind woman who really believed the Bible. So I had a choice in that moment to say, I'm going to work with her or I'm not going to work with her. And in my mind, I felt that this was an opportunity, because if I didn't work with her, then I was no better than the baker who turned down the gay couple and didn't want to.
Okay, so there's a question in the chat about that. And I was hoping maybe somebody who hasn't, I talked a lot, who hasn't said something, maybe Megan or Aaron. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that. And I think everyone else would too. So it says, okay, to what extent should we say it's okay to exclude others? I think last year there was a huge debate because a baker refused to create a cake for an LGBTQ couple. It's just a cake.
Right.
Why are we making a cultural war over pastry? I have a big reaction to that. So I'm gonna step out. Let somebody else do it.
But I just want to really finish before we answer that, because this may kind of help with that. And then Erin and Megan and whomever, definitely speak to it. But I chose to work with her. She was my client for 4 years. And the third year, she got to know me, never even thought about it. We did our annual meeting and she said, so, and she never asked me this before, what did you and your husband do over the holidays? Because she just assumed, right? And I said, oh, my wife and I went to her family. And she went, oh, and she went, oh. So she realized that everything that she said to me the last 3 years about the gay community, that was actually an attack on me. And she said, I hope you know that none of that was personal. I said, yeah, it kind of was.
How could it not be?
How could it, right? Now, but she didn't know, right? But as she got to know me, it made her rethink that gay people, like we said, Scott, like Jews, right, have horns and tails. It gave the opportunity for her to see somebody that she cared about and loved who was gay. And it kind of made her look at things a little bit differently. But Megan and Erin and everybody else, go ahead and ask that. respond to that question, because that was my experience on that.
Well, when it comes to, doing business with people or creating content or working with folks who have, let's call it the misfortune to be terribly bigoted, there's a certain responsibility. I know that I come into this as a content producer. I produce people's content that is not my own. And so that comes down to a question of what level of complicity does a content producer, a platform, like Zoom, for example, like Substack, for example, what responsibility do the people who get content from people's brains out into where other people can be aware of them to make sure that that content is not going to cause harm? So I think that's a really big part of the debate and the conversation right now is it more important that everyone gets to say what's on their mind and have that platformed, or is it more important to make sure that non-harmful things or that harmful things are not being propagated? And that can come up in a lot of different ways, and businesses can come up with, and who you work with. I know for my company, we've made the choice, we don't publish content that is bigoted, of any flavor of bigoted. And that comes down to our clients, our own content, or the guests that they have on their own shows. And that's, a choice that we've made. Another way it comes up is the platforms that you use. So Substack has become really, really popular right now. If you're thinking about paid newsletters, paid content creation, well, Substack takes 10% and platforms white supremacists. How do you feel about that? That's, there's, again, no right or wrong answer for each business. Sometimes you have to use the tools that are available. And it's, I guess, another thing to consider. It happens in a bakery, and it can happen at a podcast production agency, and it can happen at a coaching consultancy. And I think, kind of to what many other people said, you really have to decide for yourself, to what level am I going to engage with this discussion? And to what level am I going to take actions and make those actions known? And I think that's a really personal decision that needs to be made.
Goes back to the values piece that we were talking about for me as well, right? I mean, Heather, I had a similar reaction in regards to the bakery issue. But I think, from a values perspective, personally, I have a value around accepting individuals for who they are and how they want to be, period, as long as there's no harm, right? And they're not harming others. So for me, in that situation, it's not making a big deal over cake because there's a broader issue there, right? It's, first of all, a violation of my personal values. One of those is anti-discrimination, and that is the bigger piece here from my perspective as well, which in this particular situation, when something like that becomes acceptable, but then is harmful to another group of individuals, that's discriminatory, right? And from a legal perspective here in the States, as screwed up as things are right now politically, there's also a whole secondary piece to all of that as well about, things that can happen from a safety perspective too. So it opens doors as well in what I will say is a negative direction. But it all comes back to, the values that I personally have in a situation like that. I do not think it's making a big deal just about a cake. There's a bigger issue there.
There's a much bigger issue there. Yeah, 100%. Dr. Aaron?
Yeah, I want to go back to this question about, the word excluding people. And I know a lot of us here on the panel are coaches. We can't help all however many billion people are on this planet. We have to make exclusion decisions, even not about our identities, in who we work with, right? So it's one of many criteria for me when I'm thinking about who I'm going to work with. Are they working on a problem that I feel like I can help them with? Do I feel like they're coachable? Do I feel like they're ready? So I just want to remind ourselves that, yes, we have to be exclusionary in a whole lot of different realms, because we cannot serve everyone, even though we're all bleeding hearts who want to serve everyone. And what's really powerful for me in terms of this context is, in my coaching, at the end of the day, what's going to happen for my client is they're going to feel deep, deep love and acceptance for themselves, even if they're working on a business problem with me. And I can't, in good conscience, help somebody love and accept themselves if they can't love and accept me in that container.
Yes, thank you.
Right?
Like would do. Go ahead.
And so it's not serving them or me for me to try to, in other realms of my life, I'll do what Iris does. I will be that person that changes minds, especially around non-binary, because I'm a walking billboard for it. But in my coaching practice, I'm here to serve another person, and it will not serve them or me if I try to be the one that's going to change their mind about queer people.
Interesting. I mean, and that's a great outlook. And I wasn't necessarily trying to change her mind. I wanted to, you know what I mean? I wanted to show her, I wanted to give her that option. And it was either going to make her look at things differently or not. And
I mean, I think the fact of the matter is, Erin, if they're not comfortable with you, they're not going to hire you. And that's why,
yes,
that's why I'm loud. That's why you're not going to find a bio of mine anywhere that doesn't have the pride flag on it. You're going to know what you're getting. And that's a boundary we can set. And Kevin, you had an interesting comment in the chat, and I agree about this topic and how it relates to boundaries and where are we willing to push and what, you know, what all that is.
right. And so my bio has my wife in it very clearly. You know, when I'm not doing whatever, I'm spending time with my wife and my 2 kids, because I want that very freaking clear that, you know, I have a wife, because I think it's important, and people see that and they work with me, and they know. But, you know, again, we had the conversation on the panel. If I open up my Zoom with a prospective client and I see a MAGA hat on the back, what, thank you, girl. Yes, there you go. Right. But if I see like a MAGA hat, I know I'm not working with that person. Now, I'm not going to tell them, screw you, this isn't going to work anymore. I used to do that. I'd be like, no, and disconnect. Now I'll wait a couple of days and say, you know, I went back to the team. We really can't help you, because I know that there's no way in hell. Number one, in my heart of hearts, and I hate to even admit this, I don't want them to succeed, at least not with my help. So I can help them, right? Because I know where their money is going. So, so one of the things that, and Heather, you brought this up on Monday, which was huge. Yes, you did. The hidden emotional value. Talk about that.
The
Well,
hidden
let's
emotional
let's talk.
value
Let's talk.
of what? Of being a proud,
Of being,
loud, queer
of being
entrepreneur?
proud and loud, or
Yeah.
the hidden emotional value, or the hidden emotional labor that it takes on us, right? That we take on.
Ooh. Yeah. Well, I will speak briefly about that from my perspective, but I do think there are other panelists that have a very different experience on that. First of all, there is a lot of positive, right? I love the queer community. I love the people on this panel. We were like BFFs within 40 seconds of being in a Zoom room together. There's something, you know, I always like to say there are no safe spaces. There are only safe people. It's the people that make a space safe. And so I said that in the chat, clear as kind, right? And I want to be around other queer entrepreneurs and queer founders, because I really want to see you guys win. I am your biggest fan. I want that. And so there's all sorts of emotional joy in that. If, though, you are constantly taking the role of somebody who has to educate, and I can only speak from the straight passing privilege, because I don't, quote unquote, look gay. My kids have always joked that if I wrote a memoir, it should be not your typical lesbian, which is dumb because there isn't one. But people will have all kinds of conversations with me, and then I'll just gain their trust and slide in the gay thing later. And they go, oh, I didn't know. And I'm like, but you already trust me. So now you're going to listen. Sometimes I'm too freaking tired to do that. Sometimes I don't want to do that. And so you've got to think about what is the emotional labor involved. I have a lot of privilege. My skin color being the most prominent of those privileges, right? And other people don't have those privileges. So I try to take on some of that emotional labor in lots of communities where I can build trust. So it's a wonderful thing. And also sometimes it's really heavy. And I know there are other people who have thoughts on this, so I'll share.
A couple of things really popped to mind. One is I become a walking billboard, right, for non-binary. And so boundaries that we've already talked about is having good boundaries about when I'm willing to be a walking billboard and when I'm willing to educate. But something that also just really occurred to me. So you can see in my Zoom that I have my pronouns. They automatically show up everywhere I go. And there are some networking communities where people can see that my name is Dr. Erin Baker, but they cannot for the life of them use my pronouns. And so I'm constantly making a choice about my safety, about speaking up. And one of the things that's been so powerful is finding in certain communities my one ally who I know will always do the labor for me. And so I want to encourage those out there that are doing a lot of hidden emotional labor and having to decide on a daily basis whether to do that for themselves. It's really powerful to look around you and figure out who's that one person that you know always has your back, and let them have your back. And also inviting people to do some labor for themselves before they ask you questions. I remember a couple of years ago on Non-Binary People's Day, a Black friend of mine actually encouraged all of our friends to go do the labor of understanding non-binary before asking me questions. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, what a relief. So that's the two things: find that ally and encourage people to do their research before they ask you questions, so that you're not having to be a walking educator unless you really want to be.
The other thing I'll add on to that is be an ally whenever you can, speak up whenever you can, but also know when to pass the baton, when to not speak. So there's some nuance to it, but if you can raise other people's voices up, just like that, go do your research, check out this person, do that. That's a really important aspect to all of this, is when you should be quiet and when you should be loud.
Yes. And it is very nuanced. You have to really, really know that. And we only have a few minutes left. So do we have any parting thoughts to tell the community out there, the worldwide community out there?
Well, I think, one of the things we talked about too is not all doom and gloom, right?
I'm gonna put a time on it, like 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, just not all doom and gloom. So I just want to reiterate that point, right? There are positives, right? And those relate to, your boundaries and your values and what you want to make of it. But if you come out in the workplace, depending on where you're at, for example, and you live your authentic life and you make that decision, there are positives that can come from that, right? So it's not all necessarily negative. I just think that that's, an important thing to keep in mind as well. And same with the people we choose to associate with and support.
Absolutely. Megan?
I think one of the nice things about being a business owner, and this is, to whatever extent is possible anywhere in the world, is that, you don't go to all of the considerable trouble of starting your own business to create a lousy company culture, right? So you can, we really have a lot of power to make, the workplaces that we create and that we're a part of great for other people to be in. And that's a tremendous benefit. It's a wonderful thing to be able to get to add to the world.
Beautiful. Erin?
Marianne, I saw you had a point, and it was so interesting to me, this notion of it may be this way in this country, in the US or in another country, but we don't all have that same opportunity in other countries. And what always occurs to me is there's something that is bigger than ourselves. And it's not a great answer to your question, but I do like to think that what we're doing now paves the way for future generations, wherever we are. Just like Stonewall here in the US paved the way for us, what we are doing now should be in the service of making our lives better, of course, but also for making the lives of the generation that comes after us better too, whatever country we're in.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kevin. Erin?
I'm going to defer to Annie because everybody said such great things. I don't have a new thing to say yet.
Okay, Annie.
Kevin definitely stole my idea. So typical male. But I'm kidding, y'all. I'm kidding. That was a gender joke.
Yes.
The actor Harvey Guillen said something earlier this year that stays with me every single day, which is that it shouldn't be called coming out. It should be called being let in and then letting other people in. And to Kevin's point, no matter how we choose to boundary ourselves, keep ourselves safe, show up, put a flag in our bio or don't, put our pronouns or don't, right? Go to Florida or don't. No matter what we are choosing to keep ourselves safe, the next generation is watching us and we are letting them in by living our own example, right? So if you are out there in a queer identity, in a business of your own or in a corporate structure, thank you for making the choices that are right for you, because people that are not yet able to own their boundaries are watching you. And I think it's a really important point that Erin made about not being the need to be a teacher to all people at all times. And yet the eyes are on you. So one of the things is you are creating change. Thank you and congratulations.
Wow, that was beautiful. I want to thank everybody on the panel. I know Ram is going to pop on in a couple of seconds, probably with questions, but all of you, thank you so much. I knew on Monday, once we spoke, that this was going to be amazing. Ram, I think we need like another hour in order to be able to cover like all of the things. So, you know, thank you. So does anybody have questions that, I mean, I know there's a bunch in the chat.
Yeah, there are a couple of them. One I noticed that we didn't cover here was, I think you used, it was during the discussion when we had the distance between love and sex. And the question was about the weaponization.
Yes.
Also, how you weaponize the dialogue or the exchange. So you turn it from love into sex. So what kind of thoughts you have? So how do people resist the weaponization process? So when it's so easy to manipulate people when you weaponize it.
Wow. That's a hell of a, like, you know, weaponizing it. I didn't even look at it that way. I think you have to turn the conversation around, and I'm going to let the other people, Heather, respond to that. But did I cough that?
Oh yeah, so love versus sex. So weaponization of someone's status isn't,
Yeah.
that is Machiavellian.
Yeah, I mean, from a weaponization standpoint, I may not be the most qualified to speak on it, but I can say that when I was coming out, and again, I was 38, I had 4 kids, I was going through a divorce, and people would and it was almost an insult. Well, I don't care who you sleep with, just take care of the kids. Like all of a sudden, like who I slept with made me a less capable parent. And being queer, being gay, however you want to identify on that, is not about who you sleep with. It's about who you are.
Yes.
And I would get so frustrated with that. And I think, you know, it gets politicized, it gets weaponized because you can zero in on that part. You know, I just rejected it out front. Like, it's not who I am. And also I said this, and it's important. I am super proud of being queer. It is a beautiful part of my identity, but it isn't my whole identity. I'm all kinds of things. I'm sassy. I love to curse. I'm a podcaster. I'm an author. I'm a mom. I'm a partner, whatever. I'm a good friend. Like, there are a lot of things. So
and I think maybe that's how we take the weaponization out of it, right? Is that is not all of who we are. That is only a part of who we are, because to your point, I'm a musician, I'm a, you know, whatever, all the other things, right? Loyal friend, dog lover, you know, wife, so many different things. So I think to unweaponize it, we have to take the weapon out of it. We have to turn the story around. Does anybody else have anything to say on that? Okay. Any other questions, Ron?
Yeah, there were a couple. I would like you to comment because you brought up, you know, the issue of safety. And I remember Nate Shayev, you know, they had a very long and interesting post on LinkedIn. And they said, and the title was, "You invite me to your event, but did you make it safe for me to be there?" So I would like to go back. I don't know if you guys had the opportunity, if you in the audience have not, just go look them up. So Nate Shayev. And it was a very interesting post because we don't think immediately, or maybe here it's a US-centric kind of question, but not even here we think about someone's safety before we extend the invitation. You know, would like you guys to comment, to go back about the issue of safety or personal integrity here.
I mean, safety is, you know, we have to worry about where we vacation, right? Like, I don't go to Jamaica because I know, you know, a friend went with another gay couple and they got killed. So, you know, I'm not going to go to Jamaica. I think when we invite people to events, 100%, we need to make sure that it's safe. And, how do we know that? I guess it's just by vetting the event. And maybe that's something that we all need to start thinking about, because I never even thought of that until now. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. Anybody else?
Well, it's a good point. I work a lot with psychological safety with my clients, and psychological safety and trust go hand in hand, right? So oftentimes it is a secondary consideration, especially if I'm working with them around diversity related initiatives or things of that nature, is taking that pause, first raising the awareness, but then taking that pause to say, okay, so what does safety look like for this particular audience that I am inviting to this particular event, right? And speaking with them and getting that feedback, and then taking that and catering your event appropriately, right? Without assumption, and without lack of consideration.
And so I wanted to share with you. So I was invited to a group discussion, and the people were not engaging. It was during Pride Week. And it was a big debate here in Arizona about bathrooms. Should we make bathrooms accessible, not accessible, etc. But the people were absolutely not engaging. They were just like, rolling their eyes and thinking this, well, why in the world are we talking? It's kind of similar to the pastry issue about bathrooms. And then I shared with them, what happened with me. So I was young, and we went to France, and we went to the Versailles Palace, and there are no bathrooms there, right? And then we put so many jokes after the French, right? Oh, how foolish could that be? How stupid they are, and we're having a great laugh on the expense of the French. The next speaker was a transgender person, and they said, well, and they were invited to go somewhere, and I'm sorry, I can't go. And they said, well, why not? He says, well, I'm only limited to my driving time because there are no accessible bathrooms. And then people look at each other, so they're no different than the French. I mean, it's something as stupid as, or as foolish, if you may, as having an accessible bathroom. What is really important? I mean, who uses the bathroom? You know what you're doing in there. So that's, so why not make sure it is inclusive? Why not making sure it is accessible? And for most of us, so we had several debates over, neurodiversity, and we had debates about making places accessible, but making them accessible is not just about the physical. It's about the psychological, the emotional. So people are whole people, right? So why can't we make places accessible to others? Why do we have to make that a war? And I think there was a comment in there over the pastry. So is it really about the pastry, as you guys mentioned, or is it about, there's this underlying hatred, or there's something in there that
The
they don't
overarching
politically
discrimination. I mean, that's
politically
right?
correct to say, right?
Yeah, it's the overarching discrimination. And I noticed a lot. I went to in Lafayette, Indiana. I was very surprised. I went to use the bathroom, and it said, it had a sign that said, I don't care who you are, just wash your hands. And I thought, it's kind of cool. It was a little dismissive. It could have been done a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, it was like, just be a good human. And I think that is the overarching message here, is that we need to be good humans. Like, we need good humans in the world that are just going to stop hating and stop all the crap that, make other people feel uncomfortable, queer, Black, Mexican, Muslim, Jewish, whatever it is. I think it's just stop the hate at the end of the day.
I always
that's
thank
nice.
management when they have gender neutral bathrooms, because I want them to know that it's important to me, and I look like a girl. I am a girl, right? I want them to know it's important to me. I feel safer in that space because they have a gender neutral bathroom, and I want them to know that it's making a difference.
Right.
I've
And
also been at an event where they didn't have gender neutral bathrooms, and people said to the organizer, why don't you have gender neutral bathrooms? And I watched them print out a piece of paper. This is how easy inclusion can be.
Yep.
Okay. I watched them print out a piece of paper that said gender neutral bathroom. It took 15 seconds. They walked across the hallway, they taped it up over a men's room sign, and guess what? We had a gender neutral bathroom. Now, that doesn't fix the underlying why
that
wasn't
conference
there
with you.
there in the meantime, right? But like instantaneous fix, not on the foundational level, but on the safety and inclusion level, right? And that's that active allyship that Aaron was talking about, which is like, if you don't see a gender neutral bathroom, go ask for one, because they can have one immediately in a matter of seconds with a printer and a piece of tape, right? And not every change is that easy, but some of them are.
Right. And if they're willing to do that, right? But
And
yes.
if they're not willing to do that, why? Then
Right.
we have a dialogue. Then we have to really say, okay, this is not active allyship anymore. This is saying this is now out of step with my values, and how will I address this event differently next time? Or
Right.
how am I going to show up differently tomorrow or today at this event? Because I rallied and advocated and I was not heard, or I rallied and advocated and I was told no. That changes the narrative.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know how to thank you. So all of this is happening because Deb Ditz and I, so with the chairs of the conference, we interviewed the first woman on the Chicago Board of Trade. And you ask, tell me about your life. And some people do tell you about their lives. And then towards, it was very difficult because the first woman, so like, it's a 1 hour conversation. But and towards the end, she turned the question to me and asked, what proportion of VC capital do women get? So neither I nor Deb, we're not our field of expertise. We guess, half of the population, 50%, 40%, 30%, 20%, 10%. No. Then we asked, okay, what proportion? And she did this. And then we said the 2%, women get 2%. And she said, yes. So we know the journalist stuff. So we turned around and started asking other people. And then the response we got was, if your friend who is blonde and white gets 2%, so what do I get? A brown woman, a black woman, a black man, a gay woman, or someone who is, in multiple categories. And that's when Deb and I sat down and said, well, we have to stop talking about this and start doing this. So the real focus of all of the conferences we do is about that. So we focus on women and minorities because we see that inclusion must be a mission, but not for A or for B, but for all of us. If we cannot make an environment where we're all accepted, and I work in futures, right? So I try to tell people the only acceptable future is one that is co-created and one where all of us have a place, right? And I don't know how to begin, love what you guys do. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your views, your perspectives, your challenges, your accomplishments, because that's really what we are here for, is to help the next generations not to make the same mistakes we did. So I'm perhaps older than most of you. Do not repeat the mistakes we did, but you don't have to walk in front of the bus to know that's not a very smart idea. So perhaps creating a more welcoming environment will benefit all of us, and they will not be as dumb as we were in the past.
I was
Thank you.
honored. Thank you for
Well,
having me.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been an honor. Thank you,
Thank you so
everybody,
very
for
much.
joining.
Thank you.
So,
And folks, please make sure you go back to the agenda, look at their names, and if you click on their names, it connects to their LinkedIn profiles. So make sure go and connect, learn more about the work they do, and say hi on our behalf. So again, folks, thank you so very much for being here with us. And I love what you guys do. And we're going to move to the next session. Thank you so much.
bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.